I should say that that there was some discussion over a lot of discussion when we put out our topics, in that we did not include sexual orientation and gender identity as part of the American Community Survey. And unfortunately, we had a little error that in one appendix that said beware, but that was incorrect, and it was unfortunate. But I think the important thing is that everyone has to understand that the Census Bureau does not determine the questions on the American Community Survey. The Census Bureau facilitates the questions that go on the American Community Survey by soliciting information in conjunction with OMB from other federal agencies that require information to administer their programs. And there is a formal process that we go through to determine if a question should go on the American Community Survey or should go off. And it basically starts with the Census Bureau obtaining information from federal agencies, and then that is considered by a subcommittee that is chaired by the chief statistician and the director of the Census Bureau, which considers factors like, is there a legal or programmatic, by programmatic I mean a government program administration, need for the information? Is it needed at small areas of aggregation? And is it the only, would the American Community Survey be the only source of this information? So we just have not received the kind of information we need to go forward with that process.
Thank you so much, Director, for addressing the 2020 Census and ACS report to Congress. I think lots of people have quite a few questions about that. But I know that the process that you all went through was pretty rigorous to figure out what questions to submit to Congress. And I think the outstanding question for some of us is that you say that you haven't received the information that you need to move forward with that process, and I completely understand the years it takes of testing and determinations to figure out what is necessary on the ACS and the 2020 census. But you said you look at three things. You look at legal and programmatic need. You look at whether the data is needed at sort of that local or tract level to make determinations about how government funds are allocated. And you said that you look at whether or not the American Community Survey would be the only source of that information. And I think those all seem like really smart factors to look at. But it's my understanding that some of the federal agencies did lay out where there would be a legal or programmatic need. And I think that Congress has recently indicated that they see a legal or programmatic need as well. For example, in a piece of legislation that was passed toward the end of the last administration, the AHCA, they directed NIH to study more clearly how sexual and gender minorities are experiencing health disparities, right? So that's just one indication from Congress that they see a legal need for it, a programmatic need for it. But we also see programs in other federal agencies like the Department of Housing and Urban Development that directly address, for example, young folks experiencing homelessness who make up 40% of that population. And in other HHS programs, in programs at the Department of Justice and elsewhere, laws like the Prison Rape Elimination Act and the Violence Against Women Act specifically name LGBTQ folks as part of the population that's at risk. So I think that I see a clear legal and programmatic need. And I know from how those programs function that how resource allocation is determined needs to be at a pretty local level for us to determine where there are LGBTQ young folks experiencing homelessness or where LGBTQ folks are being incarcerated at disproportionate rates. And of course, there are some small federal data sources, but there's no major source like the American Community Survey that would get us to that information. So I think the open question for me is how do we get you more information so that you can move forward with that process? How can the public let you know, and how can advocates let you know, and how can the federal agencies let you know that this is something that both Congress and the federal agencies need under existing law, and that hopefully we'll need to create more existing law that will serve the communities that need federal resources. Thanks so much.
We do work with the other federal agency, with some federal agencies right now to collect information on sexual identity and gender, I'm sorry, gender identity and sexual orientation. So we work with the National Center for Health Statistics to collect information on the health interview survey. We're working with the Bureau of Justice Statistics to collect information on the National Crime Victimization Survey so we can understand the effects of unreported crimes on that population. But for the American Community Survey, we have polled the federal agencies, and we have not gotten a positive response that would indicate that there is a need for this information on the ACS in particular. And look, I have gotten a letter from 80-some members of Congress. It's a very thoughtful letter. It really lays out a lot of important issues for the population and why it should be included on the American Community Survey. But you know, the Census Bureau is a statistical agency, and so we just don't determine policy. Our mission is to collect, you know, objective, unbiased data and provide that to policymakers. But we don't determine what the policy of the United States is. So we go to great lengths to facilitate that process. So we have you know, everything represented on the American Community Survey that should be, but we just don't formulate the policies.
And if I just could have a quick follow-up, I understand you don't make the ultimate decision, that it's both in the hands of the federal agencies, but also in the hands of Congress. And of course, we've continued to ask Congress to pass legislation like the Equality Act that would make very, very explicitly clear that these data are needed in order to enforce existing law. I think that's clear already. The Equality Act would go sort of one step further to making it explicitly clear. I do know, though, that in that poll of federal agencies, that some agencies did indicate a programmatic need. So I think I would love to think through with you and with other members of the census what threshold we need to get to. If it's a poll and it's sort of a numerical thing, and some agencies say yes and some agencies say no, that's one piece. But if there's you know, if there's a threshold we need to get to, we would just love to talk through with you what that would be, so that we can so that we could ask those agencies to make that clear to you.
No, it's not a poll. It's not popular vote. So we look at those. We get our general counsel involved. We get them involved with the general counsels of the other agencies. I mean, we're not lawyers, but we do have some really good general counsel to really explore the needs there. So, and we did go through that process very exhaustively. We should talk more, maybe offline a little bit, about some things.